What's up, everyone? We are coming up on the fresh new 5v5 season. Very much excited for that. And yeah, this is something I honestly did not expect to be talking about again. Back when Tano first released, you might remember seeing this team as something I kind of mentioned offhand, right? If you think back at the time, Gideon was a high value person for offense. I mean, he still is, but Wat was also very high value for offense. And you know, between the meta changes as well as last season, I was already able to figure out a spot where Wat could be saved for defense. This team has started to make more sense, but there's one issue that I have to call out as a quick correction to myself from the original team comp idea. This does not work the way it sounds. I had someone send me a DM that said, you know, whether this is a bug or just CG kind of intending something different than what they wrote. This is not blanket 25% damage reduction. That was the hope. It sounded a lot like a team-wide lifeblood, which sounded fantastic, but if you go into the SUH.GG mechanics, all this does is reduce the enemy team's offense by 25%, which is still not bad, right? But that means that Jedi Lesson spam, any true damage effects, stuff like that, are going to be fair game, unfortunately. So at least the idea of building a somewhat bulletproof team sounded a lot less viable, so pretty quickly I took Gideon off the table as making sense here, right? A JML team would not have to reach far or hard to snipe Gideon on the side there with all that true damage spam while still kind of addressing the rest of the team. So that begged the question of who are we adding here instead? We had a few options. You know, L3 was the person that I ended up going with for the last 5v5 GAC season. And she does her job for the most part. You know, she does offer Cat some cleansing off of like an F-Lix opener. Cat could get a ability block taken off of her. Stuff like that. But I think what has really won me over here is the man sitting in number 2 here, who I'm going to be attempting to run for the beginning of GAC season, is going to be General Kenobi here. General Kenobi does a few things at once. Kenobi has, I would say, some of the best protection we could try to find for Rey here, mostly because of his unique. What we're looking for here is the automatic crit immunity that he grants whenever anyone gets crit. This means that for any strategy that is going to gun down Rey, the crit immunity will help make sure that they have a much harder time trying to gun her down. This is going to help buy her time. Stall is a very common theme on the team overall, and I think GK kind of helps align with those goals where possible, as well as, you know, we have some soft Shien synergy. If we're thinking about the possibility of her getting to ult, that could work. But yeah, I think overall, it kind of just makes this team much more well-rounded and much more synergistic. Even though I do kind of like L3 in this spot, GK, if we can get him to fit, would be nicest. Of course, this kind of begs the question of, if you were using GK and Master Kenobi or Padme, what you do instead. Depending on your uses for Padme, I do think Padme can run without GK if you're fighting like something like General Grievous, if you can chuck Barris in there as well. Master Kenobi, you can try to run Mace as a soft tank replacement and just, you know, run him speedless given the damage immunity and say good luck. But yeah, you know, that is kind of the up cost of this team right now. But I do think that the cost value benefit can be worth it here, surprisingly. You know, we can go into mods in a second here, but I also will shout out Barris as kind of an untested wildcard here, so to speak. Barris will lead to the guaranteed tank tech on Vandor. And, you know, you think about this team has a huge health pool to work with. Barris could provide a lot of pretty crazy regen overall, right? But yeah, I haven't really had a chance to test her much. She sounds interesting, but I can't really take her much beyond just the interesting qualifier for now, but I did want to give her an honorable mention. Now, for this team, the modding, this is a very technical team from the modding perspective. I'm going to try to keep it very simple here, but there are, you know, if you're a creative person, this is a team where there are some levers for you to kind of build whatever sounds interesting to you here. So, first things first, I will say, this team is a Rey carry team. Commander Tano in this team, for the most part, she is not doing much. This team is built specifically and entirely to buy Rey time to try to pop multiple ults off, try to get some more ones off, try to just start severely damaging, if not ultimately destroying members of the enemy team, And what this means is we cannot afford to skimp on Rey offense. Now, of course, you have to work with the mods that you have. And, you know, if you have or haven't been putting work into farming Rey mods, this might be easier said than done for you, but I would say at the very least, at minimum, try to at least start at 11.5 thousand offense. 12 will be a much better feeling point to work from, and if you can reach higher than that, you are in fantastic shape, I would say. Now, you know, whether you have health primaries with good % offense secondaries, or maybe you would have to just reach for a, you know, kind of like this, right? This mod is pretty unfancy beyond just being a set and a primary and some speed. I think the balancing act here is just going to be trying to crank up the offense as much as possible, while recognizing the fact that Rey cannot skimp on health too much here. If we try to cheat down Rey's health too much in order to get that offense up higher, this will lead to spots where Rey just cannot survive a strategy that's going to focus her down. You know, certain JML strats or Master Kenobi strats are going to want to try to do that. And so if you cut too many corners here, it is going to leave her exposed. Now again, depending on what mods you have farmed, you know, we do have an option to run something like this that will shoot her health up in favor of bringing her offense down. But again, these are some very specialized mods to be able to even make this choice. I would say make this a personal call. There is no real right or wrong answer here, but I can tell you again, more offense is certainly better here. More offense is certainly more dangerous here. Once you start to reach this level of offense, characters such as Jedi Knight Revan, characters who don't have bulk mechanics, will start dropping like flies to the first Rey ult, but it's difficult to hit, right? And it's especially difficult to hit this much offense without tanking this number significantly. Oh, and also, special side mention, her speed, I wouldn't necessarily leave her speedless, but I wouldn't necessarily go crazy on this, right? If you can get like 470 to 475-ish, you're happy. But, you know, again, work with what you have here. Now, we're gonna skip Vandor for a second, we're gonna go straight to Cat. Cat is a character who I kind of changed significantly from the original team idea. In the original idea, I also had her running complete bulk stack, completely speedless, which we will still be doing with the rest of the tanks here. But now with Cat, whether you decide to go a damage stack on these two primaries, or whether you decide to go health stack, I think I might still lean health stack. The idea is I do think it's worth bringing her fast enough that she is kind of getting in the mix and will represent an eventual nuke timer if the battle draws out long enough for that to become a thing. Now, this team is built to be a stall team, so that actually will happen more often than not, depending on the strategy that's being run. So that's why I do think it's worth giving her that extra speed stack where possible. I'm not talking any crazy magic number. I don't think she has to hit anything like 360 or 370. Just kind of give her what you can comfortably fit. And, you know, we've got damage primaries on here. I think I would still stick with health primaries overall. Right, we're mostly just interested in her trying to hit that first insta-kill. And depending on what the counter team is and how things play out, she could end up ramming her face into Jedi Master Luke, or Jedi Master Luke does take a lot of beating here at times. She could end up potentially taking out a side character, and certainly that's the hope. Now, before we get to the tanks, one of the nice pieces of tech that I added to this team is going to be Tenacity Wat. This is mostly just here for if you think of the Jedi Master Luke matchup. Jedi Master Luke opens with F-Flux, goes for the AoE ability block, and this Tenacity is just a nice way to help your Wat continue to be a relevant threat in the team, despite Jedi Master Luke's attempt, right? This Tenacity will hopefully let him shrug off the ability block attempt. He's going to keep out dishing out techs, and yeah, really just looking for him to remain an active participant in the fight. You know, this kind of depends on what Tenacity sets you have available. Also, ignore this crit damage triangle. I just legitimately don't have any crit damage or any bulk primaries below a certain speed. But honestly, even in this case, like I have like something like this lying around, it might even be worth the swap. You don't really want him to be too slow, but we do want to make sure he sticks on Tenacity. But yeah, if you can hit like full Tenacity stack while being around this 300 speed, this feels pretty good to me. In fact, yeah, I'll probably just shove this swap in now. Yeah, this would feel pretty good to me. We want him to be bulky. He is going to get focused down by plenty of strats. But yeah, I think this tenacity feels like a solid investment that could affect some matchups. So definitely worth keeping that in mind. Now, let's talk about the tank line. This is where things start to get pretty technical. There's a lot of choices happening here, but I will try to keep things as simple as possible. So, there are three main levers, I'll call them, for this team. We have the tank tech, the regen tech, and who gets lifeblood. Now, lifeblood is a tricky topic because, depending on the team that is attempting to counter her, we don't have Rey built for tenacity, and, like Jedi Master Luke with F-Lux, will probably ability block her before she gets to go. So, we don't necessarily get to control who gets lifeblood most of the time, but we'll get to that in a second. Let's start off with tank tech. Tank tech goes to the person with a tank tag on the team who has the highest combined health and protection. This also includes side effects. So, Rey lead, that counts. Cat unique, that counts. Vader Chewbacca's unique with the plus 80% health, that counts. If you want to decide who gets tank tech, you have to decide and calculate, do you want your General Kenobi to be higher, or do you want your Vader Chewbacca to be higher? Depending on the gear on your Vander Chewbacca, this might be a non-choice, right? If you have a Relic 8 GK and a Gear 12 Vander, let's say, that could also just kind of force your hand for you, right? Now, I think in both cases, whichever choice you do go for, speedless, well, Vander is kind of on trash mods right now, but these two should be decent examples. Speedless, or as low speed as you can get, are definitely the way to go here. Again, a lot of the theme of this team is trying to stall you out and slow you down, and speedless will help you achieve this, right? With Rey lead's effect of giving damage immunity the first time a character gets close to dying, depending on the timing of when your opponent goes for the attempted kill on them, this damage immunity with speedless could last for quite some time, which again is just in service of trying to buy time for Rey to pop ults off, whirlwinds off. We're just going for, I guess I would call it mutually assured destruction here, right? We just need to buy time for Rey to start blowing people up, really. And so yeah, very much the same call with Kenobi here. Very much the same call here. We're just trying to stack bulk, trying to keep him slow. Very much in line with if you ran slow Kenobi for a Jedi Master Kenobi. But yeah, very much the same call here. Very much the same mods. Now, a few techniques that you could do to try to ensure one person stays higher than the other. If we wanted tank tech Kenobi, you could start doing stuff like defense set stacking Vandor, if your Vandor was kind of in the pool for having enough bulk here. Unfortunately, I don't have a good recommendation for who is best to tank tech right now, because of it feels very difficult to guarantee who is going to get both regen tech and lifeblood. And let's talk about why now. So regen tech and lifeblood will both go to the ally with the lowest current health and protection on the team. Tank tech happens at the start of battle, so you don't have to worry about damage effects or anything like that. Regen tech and lifeblood do. And again, in Rey's case, we do not have her fast. We do not have her built for tenacity. So it's a very, very solid likelihood that she will just get ability blocked at fight start. She might not get to drop lifeblood until halfway through the fight, like into round 2, right? So this is where things start to get a little bit tricky, is if we give General Kenobi the tank tech, then suddenly we are talking about a Vandor Chewbacca who doesn't really have the buff, and suddenly we have lost our security blanket for Cat to keep getting revived, right? I think a wily player could identify that the team doesn't have tank tech and could play around that and potentially steal your Ahsoka early. Now, regen tech, especially with the tenacity sets here, is a bit more of an active participant here. Especially depending on the speed that you're able to give to your Wat. He is going to be hunting for this target a lot sooner. This is effectively a Rey tenacity lifeblood, so to speak. So if they decide to start focusing Vandor first or Cat first, Wat is going to basically heat seek to whatever ally is most in need and give it to them. So that's the idea for why we need to keep Wat moving fast. But yeah, this is the tweaking point of, we have tank tech going to the highest health and protection tank, and then we have regen and lifeblood going to the lowest current ally. You could specifically try to make Vandor weaker than Cat. Again, maybe we go a defense stack to go that route, or again, I think Cat will be potentially better suited with more of a health set, health primary, speed set stack, you know, something along the lines of like this. Certainly would not feel too bad. And again, not necessarily worrying about the speed. We're just trying to crank her health up, especially if we're worried about cranking Vandor down. This, again, kind of depends on your gear levels, and this is a little bit easier said than done, but yes, as I mentioned, something like a defense stack, or even if you have defense primaries, which is a, you know, depending on where you've been in the past and kind of just what mods you have available, you might not have any slow defense set defense primaries. This could be a way that you could try to cheat Vandor into that regen tech lifeblood pool very quickly. Just keep in mind again, we are worried about JML as a possible counter attempt, and a defense stack to get him lower in the pool will ultimately just mean that you're spending modding that Jedi Lessons completely ignores. And so this is where you can kind of see this team gets very, very complicated very quickly in terms of, right, there's a lot of choices to make. There's a lot of shot calls to make. If you're a creative person, I think this is actually, you know, this should sound pretty fun, right? If you want a immediate takeaway for like, you should do this and this is the best call, it's very up in the air, right? This team has so many decision-making points that it has been very difficult with all this testing to figure out what the best way to run it is, right? But at least for now, I think you might be okay with going Tank Tech Kenobi. It's a lot easier to just run Tank Tech Kenobi, especially if you don't have a high roll like Vandor. And if you are able, I would maybe, you know, say, keep in mind your Vandor bulk, keep in mind your Kenobi bulk, maybe try running Vandor higher if you can, or maybe try bumping down Vandor if you can, to try to specifically guarantee him being below Commander Tano for regen and possible lifeblood. It's a very long fight. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between those points, so it's just difficult, right? JML having low crit chance could crit Commander Tano, but not Vandor. Suddenly she's lower and blah, blah, blah. But I think this is part of why this team honestly shines on defense is this team, this original concept was built with the sole intent to be a pain in the ass. And I think for the most part, this team has succeeded. I am not telling you that this team cannot be beaten. I'm not telling you that this team cannot be one-shot. But the whole point of this is, especially if your opponent hasn't had a chance to fight this team before, it can kind of just overwhelm you. There's a lot of stuff for an opponent. If you're looking at this team and trying to figure out a plan of attack on it, it's very different than anything you can really run into anywhere else. Again, definitely the idea of a puzzle box. A puzzle can be solved inherently. That's the whole idea of a puzzle, right? But is your opponent going to beat it successfully on their first try or their second try? Or are they even going to be able to get meaningful practice? You know, would they be able to get realistic practice against an opponent? They would, you know, maybe they would practice against a non-tenacity Wat. They go in against a tenacity Wat, and suddenly the techs are coming out a lot faster. The pressure ends up being a lot higher, right? There's all of these bells and whistles and levers, and it's just crazy, right? But this is kind of the goal and the hope for this team to really just be a solid challenge. So, this is what I'm going to try running the first part of this season. GK in for L3. We ran L3 last season. She did fine, but honestly, GK for me right now is the shiny new toy, and I would love to see how he performs related to her, with Barris being on the side as a potentially interesting side consideration. We'll see how the season goes. I am extremely excited. We'll be streaming this, we'll be uploading this, and let's just see what happens, man. I'm getting my popcorn, I'm getting my refreshments. I'm gonna lean back and just, you know, that's the beauty of this team. Anytime that I, you know, see a normal raid team and I know my opponent has to fight against this, I just count my lucky stars because I don't want to have to attack this either. Anyway, happy hunting.